I hope that I can show myself to be somewhat adequate reflection of who Jesus is. Like, when I think about the fact that I may be the only Bible that people read, who I am and the choices I make and the way that I treat those around me might be the only scripture or indication that people may have of the truth of what I believe. That is humbling. And so I hope that my neighbor could actually see Jesus more through me, and not just because I'm living an exemplary life, but because I treat them in an exemplary way. When I first thought about the title, In Pursuit of Jesus, I thought, well, I already know who Jesus is, so I need to pursue him. So it can't be for me, it must be for other people. But I think if we're truly in pursuit of Jesus, then we're also in pursuit of people that Jesus is pursuing. And so we have to do both at the same time. Pursuing Jesus looks like serving him, getting to know him, learning him. And that means it looks like pursuing and getting to know my neighbor too, especially when they're different from me and especially when it would be hard. And I think as the process unfolded and the journey unfolded, I began to see the depths of what it meant to intentionally encounter every person we meet with an expectation that this person or this encounter is going to teach me something about Jesus. And if that is true, then that means when I see a fellow image bearer who is suffering, when I see someone who is struggling, then it becomes an extension of what it means to love God, to love others, and even love myself, to enter into that pain and struggle to see things from a different perspective, not just my perspective. Like, people are more complex than a simple answer deserves. And that posture and that approach really opened a lot of things up for me, a lot of experience, a lot of truths that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. It reminds me in John chapter 11, when we see the situation with Lazarus, and Martha runs up to him, and they're all friends. And she said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." And there's this huge moment where the crowd of mourners, gathers, and everyone's weeping and wailing. And then we have the Bible verse that everybody likes to memorize, in Sunday school, Jesus wept. But that small statement is very mystical. Why would Jesus weep if he knew what he was going to do already? He didn't just go, "Hey guys, don't weep because I'm the resurrection, so, I'm here." But he wept with them. He mourned with them. He felt that even as he revealed himself as the answer. And this journey has helped me to be much more empathetic and actually enter into people's story, enter into their pain. That is when I get to show the love of Christ in the midst of the suffering. That's when I get to lay down my life for the sake of others. And I also can look to Jesus and find relief in the fact that not only did he weep, but he also said, "Lazarus, come forth." In that same way, he tells us to, "Rasul, come forth." You know what I mean? That there is hope in life beyond this particular struggle. And he says that not from the vantage point of being far away, but of being very close. And I think that is a result of the value and the importance of proximity, of being close to people, of getting to know their stories, and understanding that doing so tells them more about the Jesus that I believe than any information that I can give. Like, my posture and approach and communication and listening is one of the greatest apologetics I can ever offer.